Islamic terrorism hits New York City again, this time in the form of a rented truck. 8 people are dead, 12 people are injured, recovering from their injuries in local area hospitals. We've got the full story on what happened, and we're going to have details. Fox's Caroline Shively has all the emerging details. Caroline?
Officials now confirm the 29-year-old Uzbek immigrant entered the U.S. legally back in 2010 under a diversity visa program.
It appears that Mr. Saipov had been planning this for a number of weeks. He did this in the name of ISIS.
Investigators learning all they can about Sayfullo Saipov, accused of renting a truck in New Jersey Tuesday and driving it down a popular New York City bike trail for nearly a mile, running into people, killing and injuring many.
He appears to have followed almost exactly to a T the instructions that ISIS has put out in its social media channels before, with instructions to their followers on how to carry out such an attack.
Police say they have interviewed Saipov, who is in the hospital after police shot him, ending his rampage. The suspect reportedly bragging about the attack. New York's governor says Saipov was radicalized in the U.S.
I believe we would consider this person to be an enemy combatant.
Saipov had recently been living in Paterson, New Jersey, about 25 miles from the scene. Investigators say the suspect had not been the subject of any previous investigations, but say it appears he had connections to individuals previously investigated by police.
All of America is praying and grieving for the families, and we pledge to renew our resolve and to further investigate this animal who did the attacking.
Authorities say 2 of the victims killed in the attack are from the New York City area. 6 others are not U.S. citizens. President Trump said he would consider sending the suspect to Guantanamo Bay military prison. In New York, Caroline Shively reporting for Chasing News.
Thank you, Caroline. All right, I want to bring in Diana Blass. Diana?
I'm on Genesee Avenue in Paterson, New Jersey. This is where the Tribeca terror suspect, 29-year-old Sayfullo Saipov, lived with his wife and children. On Tuesday, he killed 8 people when he rented a pickup truck from Home Depot, drove it into Manhattan, and plowed into a busy bike path along the Hudson River. One of those killed was 32-year-old Darren Drake of New Milford, New Jersey. Now the investigation turns to the suspect's home life.
I always saw the guy. I always saw him occasionally, usually coming down the street. I see him standing outside in front of his house here.
Angel Batesta lives 2 doors down from the suspect. On Wednesday, he woke up to cameras lining the block and streets blocked off by the FBI.
They did have 2 trucks. They had like a large box truck, and they had also like a large minivan on top of the Home Depot truck that was parked in front of the house for approximately about 2 weeks or something like that.
The suspect's home is around the block from the Omar Mosque, which you can see in back of me, which has a history of being under surveillance by the NYPD. One worshiper tells me he wasn't sure if the suspect visited this mosque.
We offer our condolences to the victims' families and who were wounded, and God bless them, and hopefully this man is alive. You can get more out of him.
Yeah. But he didn't come here.
We don't know, maybe. We don't know.
In the meantime, the NYPD and the FBI are continuing their investigation into the suspect's background. Here's what we know so far. The suspect came to the U.S. from Uzbekistan in 2010 through a diversity lottery program. That program is now under fire by President Trump, who says he wants to do away with it and instead put forward a merit-based program and tougher vetting. Republican gubernatorial candidate Kim Guadagno echoed that sentiment earlier today.
If we have to go back and re-examine how we vet people that come into the United States, we should, and we should do it now.
As for Democrat Phil Murphy, he appeared on WNYC on Wednesday, where he called the suspect a jerk and clearly a bad apple, but was more cautious as to whether we should do away with the diversity program. Also on Wednesday, we're learning the FBI has a second person of interest releasing this wanted photo of an Uzbek national. I'm Diana Blass reporting for Chasing News.
Thank you, Diana. All right, I want to bring in a counterterrorism expert. He's a former special agent with the FBI, former Navy SEAL, and federal air marshal. His name is Jonathan Gilliam, and he joins me now. So, Jonathan, let me start right off the bat. What is happening today? I mean, you've been through this as an expert. You left the FBI in, I think, 2013. So you've been through things like this. What is happening, and what are they doing now in terms of either prevention or finding out what actually happened?
Well, the very first thing I'm sure that happened, as soon as they got this individual's name, it was ran through the databases, and if that popped, which we're hearing rumors that it did, it actually, he's connected with other people from other cases, then we start to see a bigger picture develop, and agents that are already working other cases are now going to be working in conjunction with this case and trying to find out if there's something that they missed, and then if there's other people that might be involved with the planning. And so
now,
on and so
Jonathan, there are reports that the mosque that this guy lived close to was already under surveillance, at least at some point, by the NYPD. Let me ask you straight out, is our politically correct culture inhibiting the efforts of law enforcement to thwart future terror attacks?
Yes, it's a simple answer. Yes. You know, when I was in the FBI, we were stopped from doing certain things just simply because it was it included Muslims. Instead of focusing on where the issue was coming from, they wanted to push us away from actually doing very effective techniques in and around mosques or with different Islamic communities.
Jonathan, last question. You wrote a book about effectively thinking like a terrorist. What is your message to people as we get through this? I mean, if you're not safe walking down the bike path or biking on a city street, where are you safe?
Well, you should always think of the possibility, not the probability. Forget the numbers game. Just think, is it possible? Could something happen here? What I'm trying to teach people is that they can think like a bad guy. They can look at their own life from a bad guy's perspective, divvy it up into sectors, and then systematically figure out where they're most likely to be involved in some type of an incident and avoid it if they can. And if they can't, then they can come up with a plan of how they're going to act so they don't just have to react.
Okay. Jonathan Gilliam, thanks for joining me. Appreciate it.
You got it.
All right, let's bring in our A-plus panel to break this down. I'm joined by Laura Nanos, columnist for lawnews.com. Good to see you, Laura. Welcome back. And Bob Bianchi, former prosecutor in Morris County. Bob, let me start with you. You know, you hear about these labels, and I kind of want to play off of what Jonathan was talking about. Like right away, news anchors come out with labels. It's a lone wolf. He is this. Are we forgetting that we've got lives at stake here? And are we making a mistake worried so much about rhetoric instead of getting to the bottom of what happened?
I think we need to balance the interests and stop the political interfusion here between what's right and wrong to do. As a former law enforcement official in charge of a Homeland Security division, I care about keeping the community safe. And we're arguing more about words and what they mean as opposed to doing that. And in the situation that we have right here, he is 100% right, Jonathan. It is an ideology. This individual is brought over here, and there are other people that are going to be recruited to come over to this country and commit acts of isolated terrorism. Whether you call him a lone wolf or not, I don't agree with that. It is part of an ideology.
And Laura, let me ask you, though, it seems to me that right away the conversation started about how this guy got here. We talk about this chain immigration. We talk about the lottery. I didn't even know there was a lottery for immigration until today. It seems to me the smart thing to do would just be to close that door, but you've got people all over social media saying, stop, it's not about immigration. Is it?
You know, we do need to be careful and looking at who's coming into this country and why they're here and what they're doing. But, you know, it's not only immigrants that are making attacks on civilians. There are Americans doing that. We've seen that with other terror attacks. So I think what's important, and I agree with Bob, that it's really not about the rhetoric. It is about who is doing what and why are they doing it? And that's what we need. We need to give law enforcement the tools and funding they need to look into these people and do everything we can to prevent attacks.
And on detention, the president talked about firing up Guantanamo again. Let's get that guy and send him there. A good idea?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with Guantanamo at all. I mean, I think that we need to be able to segregate these people from your typical, ordinary criminal justice scenario. We have to be very cautious of something here. The fact is, Bill, whether people politically correctly or not want to agree with this, ISIS and those folks are putting people in these lotteries for the specific hope that they can get over to this country. If they do, and they're Confederates, they need to be placed into a separate piece of the criminal justice system.
It's how they abuse the flow of refugees in Europe. They try to do it here. This shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. Certainly, though, if you find a door that's open, it's time to shut it. All right, thanks, guys. Terrorism in New York City. We've already learned a lot more details about the jihadist who shouted Allahu Akbar as he got out and mowed down 8 people in New York City. We're learning a lot more now about the victims of this heinous, hateful crime. One is a New Milford man. His name is Darren Drake. He's 32 years old. He was a Rutgers grad and a former president of the New Milford School Board. Also, 5 men from Argentina. These guys were here celebrating the anniversary of a graduation, all 5 killed while riding a city bike. And in another awful story, a victim, a mom of 2 kids from Belgium who was here riding her bike with her mother and her sister. Now, her mother and sister were not harmed, but the mom was killed when she was hit from behind. Obviously, our thoughts and prayers are with the victims who lost their lives and, of course, with the victims who are now recovering from their injuries. But more importantly, now it's time to think about action. How do we prevent this from happening on our soil again?